Welcome to On the Way, a podcast about life. But not just any life, it's about life with Jesus. Why do people follow Jesus, and how do they get started? And what difference does following Jesus make in their lives? Before Christians had a name, they were known as people of the way, people who followed Jesus' teachings. People have been on the way for nearly 2,000 years now. During the podcast, we explore the ways that people become followers of Jesus and why, and what difference following Jesus makes in their lives. On the Way is produced by the Baptist Standard, a donor-supported provider of news, opinion, and resources for living like Jesus. I'm Eric Black, editor of the Baptist Standard. I'm glad you're with us today. We have with us today Mary Whitehurst, who lives outside of Austin and is serving in women's health. And Mary, we are so glad you're with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
As we say at the beginning of all of our interviews, the focus of On the Way is how did you become a follower of Jesus, and what difference does following Jesus make in your life? So before we get into those questions, tell us about what you're doing.
Yes, for sure. So right now, I have the pleasure of serving in the capacity of CEO of an organization called the Source for Women. I am in charge of the Austin region, and we are a network of free and low-cost women's clinics across the state of Texas. A fairly new project, although it's taken a couple of years to get underway. We were able to partner with Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston to start this network of clinics. One thing that is unique about us is that we are faith-based organizations. And so when we sit down and look at helping a woman in her health journey, not just looking at what her health history has looked like, but what her plans for the future are. We try to make sure that we're serving her holistically. And part of serving someone holistically is also being able to take care of the spiritual and faith aspect of their lives. So we have a really unique opportunity, I think, in the healthcare space to do that. And it's been a really fun adventure. I've only been CEO for 6 months. And so in the midst of a pandemic and a lot of other craziness that's been happening, but God's been really faithful and led us through this time really well. So we've been able to continue serving women this entire time that we've been trying to navigate through the closures. So it's been really good.
I heard you say you've been CEO for 6 months. So that means in January, you started this new thing full of energy and excitement and maybe some nerves, and nobody expected 2 months later to be where we are now. So you had a lot to learn all at once.
Yes, for sure. I think, thankfully, I have been a part of this organization for about 4.5 years already.
Oh, good.
And
Okay.
so I was very familiar with the inner workings. I was very intimately involved with kind of this transition and new services and partnering with other cities. So those parts of it were kind of foundational and in place. And the staff was familiar with me. I actually brought on most of the people that work with us right now. And so that part wasn't as much of a difficult task as it was just transitioning into understanding what the new role would look like. And I will say that I've had some really amazing support. I have some wonderful mentors. I've actually been able to be a part of an organization called C12 that is Christian business leaders. So I have an entire group of other CEOs that are believers that have been helping me walk through this season,
Wow,
and
that's
have gotten
fantastic.
hit with just a little bit of everything. Had to, just had changes in staff right away. Then the pandemic happened, had to figure out how to navigate through that with managing and supporting our staff, but also with coordinating with our medical director and our board of directors. So there's been a lot of communication, a lot of grace, because everybody's in the same spot, right? I think that's what has made this tolerable, is that it's not as if my organization is the only one experiencing all of these changes. Everyone is. So everyone is just being very patient and understanding when things come up, or Zoom isn't working, or we have to switch something at the last minute. So as challenging as it's been, and as many nights as there were where I looked at my husband and was like, what am I doing? Like, are we sure this is what God told me to do? He has, like I said, led the way and been so faithful in this season. I think that there have been as many moments as I've had of doubt and worry, I've had just as many, if not more, moments of just affirmation, where I've seen him do amazing things with our donor support and people stepping up to the plate and giving very generously during this time so we could keep our staff employed. It's been a really amazing thing to watch God work in.
Yeah. So your faith in God started somewhere. Tell
Mm-hmm.
us about that.
So I think, was introduced to the Lord at a very, very young age. I have very vivid memories of my mom explaining who God was and who Jesus was to me around the age of 3 or 4. And
That's
because
pretty young.
yes, it
Yeah.
was really young. And I can remember like the afternoon, because my mom was able to be at home with me when I was that age. And so I can remember going to lay down for my afternoon nap and her just kind of going through just an explanation of, I knew we went to church. I didn't completely understand why we went. I'd heard God. I heard these terms and kind of was familiar with them as much as you can be in a 3 or 4 year old's mind. But I remember her specifically explaining to me just how much God loved me, and that he created me and he created the world, and that not only had he created everything that we see, but he had created heaven, and that he wanted to be able to spend the rest of eternity with me, that he had a very special place that was just for me. And, as a small kid, I just remember thinking, wow, that sounds really cool. I didn't really understand the depths of what it meant to have faith, obviously, but it was intriguing enough to me at that age that I wanted to find out more. And she prayed with me that afternoon to accept Christ. That I think the traditional kind of prayer, you ask Jesus to live in your heart. And so we did that at a very young age, as I said, but it did take several years for me to really understand just the impact of that prayer and that acceptance and what it really looked like to live in faith. And as someone who grew up in church, I don't ever remember a time where I wasn't in church. And my parents were just very faithful in their commitment to being a part of a local body of Christ and also to serving. And so I just remember growing up, not only being at church on Sunday, but just really being in community with the people who we went to church with. That's where all my friends were when I was young, especially before I started school. So a lot of the families that we went to church with were families that were in our home a lot and over for dinner or going on trips with. We did a lot of mission related work. And so we did a lot of those trips with people that we knew from our church family. And so this was really something that I think is just second nature to me, is being in, I guess, a place where I am joined with other believers, and this is something that is normal. And so I think that it's been an interesting journey for me, because that type of, I guess, engagement with people in the body of Christ is not necessarily normal for everyone. I have lots of friends who grew up going to church as well, but that was just what they did on Sunday. There wasn't a lot of intermingling of other activities and other parts of their lives. And so I think that's something that I'm really thankful for, because I feel like if I hadn't had that foundation, when I really did get to points in my life that were more challenging and where I really had to make some decisions on whether or not this faith was the faith that I chose or the faith that I was just taught, the foundation of at least knowing where to go to ask the right questions or to seek some understanding was there. I've always felt at home in church. It's never been an awkward or strange place for me. And so, like I said, very young when I accepted Christ, but it took me a little while to really figure out what that meant. And I think that there was a piece of that too that was probably, I guess, kind of from the standpoint of my parents' foundation, because my dad was the first person in his family to accept Christ. And then
Okay.
he went back and was able to then share Christ with his parents and with his siblings. And that kind of, I think, I guess, kind of started our awareness and acceptance of Christ within our family. And so my parents were kind of new believers, didn't have a lot of tradition or things to pull from. So they really just kind of charted their own course. But at the same time, I think it was kind of trial and error. They didn't really know exactly what to do. I'm not sure if any of us know exactly what to do to raise our children within the faith. But I think that they did everything that they could. And as I got older and had other experiences, I had some really good conversations with them about what we believed and why we believe what we believed. I had a lot of friends who were believers, but I think we all kind of struggled with just being believers on Sunday. Even though we were in community with each other, we had the same temptations as our peers that weren't in church or didn't know Christ. And I know for me, I always struggled being around people who just seemed very mature in their faith and very in touch with the Holy Spirit. I can remember sitting in church and, hearing our pastor say, well, the Lord spoke to me and he said this. And, I'm sitting there at 14, 15, like, why has God never spoken to me? Like I've been following for all these years, but I've never heard from the Lord. And, people would clarify that it wasn't audible. So I wasn't expecting to hear a booming voice from heaven, but I just didn't know what that experience was supposed
Yeah,
to be.
exactly. If it's not audible, then what is it? Yeah.
Exactly. And so I think it wasn't until a little bit later, I had some really great experiences in high school. The young man that I was dating at the time was very involved in his church. So I got the opportunity to experience church camp for the first time and to also go on mission trips with other young people for the first time. And those events were really, I guess, like the experiences, I should say, were really transformative and really formative for me, and gave me a lot more confidence that I was on the right track, because I had other believers who wanted to take their faith serious that were my age, that seemed to just have a different experience with the Lord. They seem to have a different intensity in their prayer and devotion life. They seem to have a different intensity when they approached worship. And I remember seeing that and just being encouraged by it, that it was something that was possible at my age. And that really led me to just trying to find organizations when I first got to college that would keep me grounded in my faith. And so I was able to, join a few Bible studies and be a part of the gospel choir at our school. And that was really helpful at keeping me grounded in my faith. But it wasn't until my freshman year when I went through probably my first really significant challenge.
This is freshman year in college.
Yes, freshman year
Okay.
in college.
Okay.
And, like I said, having all these experiences as a teenager and having faith always be at the forefront of my mind and trying to navigate through that and figure out how does this really affect my day-to-day life in a real way. When I got to college, I was, it was a great new experience. I had the opportunity to go to TCU in Fort Worth and absolutely loved it. But my freshman year was really challenging because I had a really difficult roommate situation. And as a harmonious person that doesn't like to have conflict with other people, I couldn't figure out how to get through to her and how to reconcile and make things better. And I remember one night, this is a constant, like talking to my friends and my boyfriend at the time, and I'm on the phone whining and crying about how difficult it is. And I can remember one evening in particular, I was just frustrated. Like she had done another thing where I was trying to study and she kind of burst in the room and was being really rude. So I just went down to the lobby and I had my Bible with me. And I was pretty upset, just very emotional. And I didn't really know what to do. But I mean, I know from just what my parents had kind of instilled in me at a young age to talk to God about it, to try to seek guidance in his word. And so I sat down, not really knowing what to expect, and just opened my Bible. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it landed on Psalm 1. And there were verses there just about kind of being able to walk uprightly, even though people don't treat you well, and not falling into that. And so I remember it was kind of almost like an aha moment, or like I almost got chills in that moment, because I felt like it was the first time that I had gone to the Bible and opened it, and the words were relevant to exactly how I was feeling and what I experienced. And so that was the first time in my faith journey that I felt like God was speaking to me. And it was really
I was
cool.
wondering about that.
Yeah.
It was like you've had that experience you'd been hearing about for so long.
Yes, finally. Yeah. And so that was, I think it was a really pivotal moment for me. I think a lot of times, even in my journey now, I feel like God speaks to me most consistently through his word. And that was true then, and it continued to be true throughout my life in college.
We're going to take a sponsor break, and we'll be right back.
Since 1952, South Texas Children's Home Ministries has focused on healing hearts and sharing hope. Their 9 ministries focus on helping hurting children and families, all regardless of an individual's ability to pay. To find out more, visit www.stchm.org.
I started out at TCU as a theater major because I was a theater nerd in high school, and thought that I was going to act and wanted to go to LA and get on a TV show and be famous. That was the dream when I was 18. And 2 years into college, I had a really pivotal experience going through a Bible study with some close friends of mine on the purpose-driven life.
Okay.
And going through that study was, again, another moment where I felt like I'm studying God's word. I'm reading these words written by Rick Warren and his kind of explanation of just kind of purpose and what that looks like. And really just got kind of the air knocked out of me one afternoon as I was reading, and just realizing that everything that I thought about where my focus should be, what the point and purpose of my life was all centered around me and what I wanted. And I had never really taken seriously, I think, even my parents' advice to be seeking the Lord for guidance and direction on what I should be doing. And granted, my parents were always super supportive of me. They wanted me to be successful and to be happy. But in those weeks of going through that study, I feel like God really just turned my world upside down. And that was, I think, the time where I felt myself drawing most closely to him, because as I was reading and better understanding kind of what it looked like to live for God and not for myself, it really just started convicting me, to the point where I was just uncomfortable. And so, like I would be reading and have a thought about kind of my own ambitions and think to myself, wow, okay, so I mean, I can move forward. I could try to continue to pursue this acting career, knowing that it has nothing to do with me trying to bring God glory in any way and all about me bringing myself glory. But if I do that, if I push through what I now know is not supposed to be the purpose and focus of my life, then I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to walk kind of with this tension in my chest, knowing that I'm not doing what it is that God is telling me to do or what he wants me to do. And I feel a lot of times that's kind of that checkpoint for me when I feel or get a sense that God's speaking something to me. It's something that I can't ignore. So if I feel him leading me a certain direction and I say, oh no, I'm just not going to do that. Like, it keeps coming back up. It keeps coming back up in times I don't expect, like 2:00 in the morning, waking me out of my sleep. Those types of things have been my experience in coming to know the Lord and to actually really just surrendering my life to him. I think that that's what started to happen my sophomore year in college when I read Purpose Driven Life, is that I had known the Lord. I had accepted him. I've always believed. Like, there's never been in question in my mind the validity of Scripture, the validity of the life of Jesus and his sacrifice and what that brought forth for us and the gift of salvation. But I just hadn't surrendered and let him be Lord of my life yet. And I think that journey started when I was a sophomore in college. I guess I was maybe 19 or 20. And really realized that my life was supposed to be centered around his purpose and glorifying him instead of glorifying myself. So it was interesting. And now that I look back, gosh, that was almost 14 years ago. And the course that God has, kind of taken my life on up to this point, I'm glad that I had that experience when I did. I could have spent a lot of years wandering around aimlessly thinking that I was following Christ and not really being kind of really centered on what his will was for my life. So that's kind of what that has looked like to me, for me, coming to know the Lord in a little bit more of an intimate way.
So it sounds like the pivot point, I'm going to put my words to it, you can tell me, you can correct me, was from studying about God and trying to be faithful to God, the pivot then being to surrender.
Yes, for sure.
Which is a different posture, in relationship to God.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. And I think that a big piece of that, to you, Eric, like I said, is I'm just the way that I'm wired is just to know what are the rules, what are the expectations, and to follow that.
Mm-hmm.
I am what I tell friends, I'm a recovering perfectionist because I've lived a lot of my life really just kind of like, anxious even about things not being exactly perfect in the way that I want them to be. And in that part of my personality was definitely present within my faith. I was very legalistic. And so it was like if I was following the rules, then I was doing what I was supposed to do, then I was a good Christian. If I was doing my 5-minute devotional every morning, I was a good Christian. If I was going to church every Sunday, I was a good Christian. So I was just what I've actually seen a lot of my peers walk through is just trying to follow all the rules so that I could feel secure, and really hitting this pivotal point in my faith in my early 20s of recognizing not only was that not what it was like to be in relationship with Jesus, that's not what it was supposed to be centered around, but that when I really surrender, the motivation for why I want to do those things was different. I think that there was maybe even a part of me until that part of my life that didn't fully believe that I was saved by grace. I think there was a part of me in my heart that still felt like I have to earn this. I have to make sure that I'm doing the right things all the time so that I can earn this. And that piece of my understanding and my belief of just really recognizing that, like, there's nothing that I have done to earn salvation. Like, this is a free gift that comes purely from God's love for us. So if that's the case, then I can let go of even just kind of the guilt and anxiety that was wrapped up in making sure I read my Bible every day, making sure I was praying, even though they were empty prayers. I said a prayer. I was going to church. And it was just a routine, kind of monotonous thing that was a part of my life. And there wasn't sanctification happening. I wasn't becoming more like Christ. And that was, like you said, the turning point of surrender and recognizing that this was supposed to look different than what I had known up to that point.
We're going to take a 60-second sponsor break, and we'll be right back. High Ground Advisors has a 90-year history of providing investment management and planned giving solutions to churches, faith-based organizations, and charitably minded individuals dedicated to transforming lives. High Ground is trusted by over 450 nonprofit clients, and we're one of them. High Ground has partnered with Baptist Standard for over 70 years by offering a comprehensive charitable giving and investment solutions model, which includes asset management, planned giving education and development, account support services, real estate and minerals management, and expert legal consultation. High Ground and the Baptist Standard share similar values, such as serving those who are called and dedicated to transforming lives and being a trusted caretaker of legacies. They also value good stewardship, helping those who desire to be good stewards of their financial resources to find creative giving solutions to fulfill that calling. They know what they do to protect, strengthen, and grow our mission is ultimately in service to the gospel. To learn more about how High Ground Advisors can partner with you or your organization, visit their website at highgroundadvisors.org. So you have this interchange. How did that work itself out from that point? Because you were studying you were studying acting.
Yes.
Your trajectory was LA.
Exactly.
So how, I mean, when you have a change that profound inside, how did that work outwardly?
Yeah. So that story also, I think every time I think about it, makes me smile because it was such an interesting response from my parents. But I grew up just outside of Dallas. So it took me 45 minutes to get home from college, which is probably not, the greatest because I spent a lot of time at home that first year, but I think it helped me get through some of the difficulties. And I only say that because in the midst of this Bible study through Purpose Driven Life, my sophomore year, I was actually at home when I had this big revelation of, oh my gosh, where the track that I'm on is not this is not the right course for me. I need to change. And so I am in, the bedroom that I grew up in, just kind of with my Bible, with my purpose-driven life book, going through the study questions and having this interaction with God, and really kind of having this debate at first with him about what that meant, and bargaining, almost being like, okay, God, like I could still act, and I'll just do Christian films. I'll only do Christian movies.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
I was negotiating, and like, I just knew in my heart at that point that wasn't where I was supposed to be. I just felt it very strongly that wasn't the course that I needed to be on, but it took me a second to accept it. And there was even a process, I think, for me, of mourning. Like, I had this dream for a long time, and it took some time for me to really let go of it and to accept that what God had for me was better than what I wanted for myself. And so in that process of then seeking him, I'd always been, I feel like, kind of maybe inclined to be a helper. So I feel like I was always the friend who wanted to figure out how to help my friends find a solution in their relationships, or in a conflict they had with their parents, or they're not getting along with their boyfriend. And so I would be the person that people came to talk through things with, and try to help encourage and kind of guide them, and maybe some decision making. And so I think in that moment of kind of knowing acting wasn't what I was supposed to be doing and trying to surrender that, I really felt in that same kind of space that God was telling me that I was supposed to be giving of myself to others. I was supposed to be helping in some capacity.
So he wasn't taking something away without giving something in return.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it was just kind of redirecting where I was supposed to be putting my times and my talent. And, I even tell my theater teacher now, she's a really dear friend and mentor of mine, and has been for all of these years since I met her at 15. And I never thought back then that what she was teaching me about presentation and projecting my voice and articulation would lead to me being licensed to preach the gospel. Like, everything that she instilled in me to help me be able to speak publicly, God is using that in a completely different way, so outside of what I thought was a part of the plan for me. And so I when I look back on it, it's just amazing to see the things that God did and how he's used all these experiences to get me where I am. And the time that I was trying to figure out where I needed to be and what course I needed to be on, I just knew I wanted to help people. So I thought, okay, maybe I need to be a counselor or something like that. So I changed my major to psychology, like probably within a week of that, and completely left all my theater coursework and stuff behind, and started the journey down doing psychology as my major. And I loved that. The classes were so, I think I just remember feeling so challenged by the things I was learning, and I really enjoyed that. And so I probably did, I think, psychology for a year, and then realized that the journey to becoming a counselor, when you go that route, means that you have to go to graduate school. You have to get a master's.
Right. That's right.
I was not really wanting to do that. And I also just didn't feel like that was, I still felt like something was missing. Like, I loved my psychology professors and my classmates. I thought, learning more about the brain and behavior and how we think and act and how that all relates was really intriguing to me. But it didn't feel like it was going to be kind of like getting my hands in the dirt and doing the helping work that I wanted to be doing. And so a friend of mine actually suggested, and funny enough, the suggestion came from, oh, here's an easy elective you can take. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll check that out. And it was Intro to Social Work. And so I took the Intro to Social Work class, and my mind was just blown. Like, everything that I had been feeling, every kind of longing that I had been having over that past year to really just get in, like I said, get my hands in the dirt and get to the place where people were hurting and needing help and support and resources, and be able to partner with them to improve their lives. And that's what social work was. And so that was the next step in me figuring out what journey I was supposed to be on. So again, I changed my major. This is, I think, major change number 4 in the grand scheme of everything, to social work. And what always
and your parents are thinking at this time.
Well, I'm sure they were thinking, this education at this private Christian school is really expensive. You need to figure out what you're doing. And they had always told me that they would help me pay for undergrad, but I had 4 years. So I had to figure out, with all these changes, how to still get done in time.
Uh-huh.
And I think what was even more interesting to me and kind of funny is that my dad, his background was very focused in ministry when I was younger. He worked for an organization called Youth for Christ when we lived in Tennessee. And so a lot of the active hands-on ministry that I saw when I was growing up was my dad working with all of these inner city youth that were always at our house. These were the people we were going on mission trips with when I was in elementary school. So I was very familiar with what that looked like. So when I came to my parents and said, I think I don't need to be a counselor, I think God is telling me to go into social work. And my dad was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. I can see that. My mom, however, started to cry.
Oh.
And when we revisit this story, we laugh about it. But part of that was because her really goal and intention for me was for me to make a good living, to be comfortable, and to not have to struggle.
And social work wasn't going to do that.
Exactly. Both of my parents came from backgrounds where they had to struggle, and they were both first generation in their family to go to college. They both went on sports scholarships, and so even the idea that I was in college and at a private university and they were helping me pay for that was my mom's dream for me. And so her dream beyond that is that education would then lead to a career path that would make me very financially stable and help me do well. And so
like becoming an Oscar-winning actor.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. But sorry, Mom.
Yeah. And so she had that moment of frustration and sadness. And I mean, that was really her concern. And she was like, you're not going to be in safe environments is the first thing she thought. She thought about, probably social workers that she saw growing up in the projects in Denver, Colorado. Like people have to go into sometimes hard situations as social workers. Yeah. And she also knew that I wasn't going to make very much money. And so that was an interesting experience. She came around. And it didn't take her very long, maybe within, a day or so, she came back and said, that she supported me. If I really felt like this is where God was taking me, that she fully supported me in going that direction. So I have a very expensive social work degree from TCU, but it has been worth the investment. And I think both my parents would say that. I had an amazing faculty when I was there, and just really opened my eyes to so much of what the field of social work could provide in the way of helping people that were the people that I wanted to be serving, the people who were marginalized and disenfranchised and impoverished. And so that was the foundational piece for me. And I got my bachelor's in social work from TCU and started off my journey as a social worker. And I think the interesting thing for me, Eric, in that is that I love social work. It's still very foundational. When I talk to people about who I am and what I do, I still say that I'm a social worker. And the thing that shifted for me is that even in helping in the way I was able to, 2 or 3 years in, I just still felt like something was missing. And I couldn't figure out what that was. And it was really frustrating. I think part of me knew that I wanted to be able to have the freedom to share my faith. When you work with people who are in such tough situations and they don't know the Lord, it's just hard. It's hard to be in a space where you're restricted. And that's where I was in the environments I worked in. I was not allowed to share my faith. And so I prayed.
So there was a huge piece missing for you.
A huge piece. And I didn't know what to do to get beyond that. And I just started praying about it. I mean, God had been faithful to me up to that point. It had guided me in the right direction. And I prayed for about a year, just consistently asking God, like, okay, why do I still feel unsettled? What is missing? Can you please just tell me what to do? And God is obviously so wise, and he knows everything. And he knew when I was going to be able to receive the next step of what he was going to tell me. And it wasn't going to be any sooner than that year. I think I needed a year of preparing my heart and growing in him to receive the word that he gave me, because I remember also very clearly the morning that I got that answer. And I'm just sitting and praying. Again, this has been about a year of praying about direction and what I should be doing. And I really just, that kind of still small voice that Elijah talks about, I felt like God whispered to me, you need to go to seminary. And I had a moment, again, of bargaining, more so of just denial. I basically said in my head, I didn't hear that. That's not what God's telling me. Because I had several friends go to seminary and talked about how hard it was. And I mean, because it's a stretching experience. I had a professor my first day at Truett say that we come to seminary to learn how to be Christians. It just stretches you so much in your faith, and you're kind of leaning into God and grappling with things you don't understand and grappling with opinions that you don't agree with, that I just didn't really want that to be a part of my journey. And so I shrugged it off and kept about my business and kept going. And then a couple of days later, praying again, and God placed the same thing on my heart. And I knew better than to run from it. I'd heard enough people in my life and ministry talk about running from their call. And so I just submitted to that. And you are familiar with my pastor that I've served under for the past 13 years, Pastor Joseph C. Parker Jr. In Austin. And he was the first person that I came to. And after church one day, I just said, hey, I really want to talk to you about Truett. And his eyes kind of lit up and he was like, wait, what?
I know what he had to say about that.
Exactly. And so I started that journey of talking to him about it, praying with my then husband. We had been married 2 months when I got this word from God that I needed to go to seminary. And so sitting down with him and saying, I really think that God's telling me to go back to school, and this is why. And so we prayed through that, and God just opened door after door. And we prayed some really specific things about like not wanting to, get any more school debt and needing God to open doors to be able to provide financially. And that was really just what I said. I said, God, if this is you, if I'm hearing this clearly, help make a way for this. And he did. So, several years later, finished that degree and now where I sit now in an amazing position, an amazing organization that allows me to blend my two loves of social work and ministry together in a way that I didn't even know was possible. So yeah, God's plan was way better than my plan was.
That's an incredible journey from 3 and 4 years old to, I'm not going to do the math. You already did it. I'll let listeners do the math. Okay. To where you are now, and how God has taken you through that, how you've responded to that. And what I hear is that coming to the place where you became a follower of Jesus, and that second question, what difference does following Jesus make in your life? For you, it's made all the difference. It's influenced just about everything you've talked about.
No, for sure. My faith in Christ has become very central to who I am as a person. It's really kind of impossible at this point in my life to even think about myself apart from that. And it's really interesting. There was a young lady that I was speaking to, a young recent college graduate, that was asking if I could, kind of mentor her. She wants to get into health field. She thinks that what I'm doing is really cool. And she was asking me all these questions. And I just said, I have to preface this because I understand that not everybody can take it. But everything that I'm going to say to you is going to start with Jesus. That is just who I am as a person. So any type of advice or experience that I have, it's always going to come from a standpoint of, this is where God brought me. This is, what I talked to Jesus about and what I heard him say to me. And so when you ask me about like, how did I get to a certain position of leadership, or how do I deal with conflict within the workplace? Like, everything is centered around my relationship with Christ. And if I'm honest, I don't know if as a 14, 15-year-old that was trying to figure out what this faith thing was really all about, if I ever would have seen myself in this place. I think it's something that I hoped I would get to, but now sitting in it and not only being in this place myself personally, but also having watched how the Lord has grown my husband and his faith over the last 11 years that we've been married, and just how central it is to everything that we talk about. And, the experiences that we have and the friendships that we build, it's really amazing to see, I guess, kind of how much God has infiltrated my life, because I just wouldn't be able to do any of the things that I do, from being a wife and a mom to being a good friend and a good boss. I wouldn't be able to do any of it well without his guidance and influence. And I think that there have definitely been experiences, over my whole life, but particularly within the last few years of being able to work in a faith-based nonprofit, that I'm just so thankful that God has grown and stretched me in the way that he has. It is because of this journey that I can make, difficult decisions, but come
Hmm.
from a place of grace. And I think we try to create a work environment at the source where people know that they're cared about, even if it's not the right fit, even if maybe the position they were hired for isn't the exact fit for them. We try to honor who God's created them to be and what they are able to contribute during the time that they're there. um, yeah, it is such a central piece of everything, and I think that I don't think that I would have the patience or the peace that I have on a day to day. There's still moments that get a little stressful and anxious. There's a lot of responsibility that I've taken on in this new role. But the thing that I feel like God really solidified for me, especially in this last 3 months, is that he's in control.
Mm.
Because there's no way that the things that have happened within our organization to sustain us would have happened just based on me. And that's something that God started to show me right off the bat. As soon as the shelter in place happened, and I started to freak out a little bit about, I haven't even met most of our major donors and supporters. Like, how do I communicate with them about what's happening? How do I ask them to continue to support us as best they can so we can continue to do this ministry? And just praying about it and submitting that and just trusting that God was going to continue to carry his ministry as he had been doing for the 35 years before I came into this role. And he did that. He laid things on people's heart without us even having to ask. And again, just solidified even more for me that this is his, that he is in charge of it, and that he's asked me to steward it well, but that he's the provider. He's always been and always will be the provider. And so, again, I think, Eric, for me, it's been that lesson of surrender, and recognizing that a lot of
Mm.
everything that I do in this space, I have to do within his strength and not my own.
Yeah. So as we come to the end of our time together, tell us about the services that the Source offers, and for those who might need your services, how they can
Mhm.
get in touch with you.
Yes, of course. Thank you for allowing me to do that. So, the Source is a free and low cost women's care clinic, and so right now in the Austin region, I mean, we cover, I think, about 10 counties around Austin. Women who are looking for support with just their general gynecological needs. So if they're needing to get a well woman exam, they can come, and we have an amazing nurse practitioner who serves as our provider. So she's able to provide STI testing, Pap test, just general kind of, she takes a general health history and can do other exams and order labs that might be necessary just to kind of help make sure that the levels are where they need to be and that a woman is healthy. Or if she has concerns, able to address those concerns as well. We do still offer some pregnancy care services. So right now, if a woman thinks that she's pregnant, we can offer her a lab grade pregnancy test as well as an ultrasound. All of our people are licensed and certified and amazing professionals who are just they overflow with love. I think that when I see the women who come in and they're just scared and not sure what to do or who to turn to, and just see how they're cared for and loved on so well in our clinic, that just I mean, it makes my heart glow, because that's what we're here to do. So those are the basic services. We also have some support services. We have a lot of women in our community with little children who just need help with basic things like diapers, wipes, formula, clothing. But we also want to be able to provide some education. So we have an outstanding education program where they can learn not only on the front end things to have a healthy pregnancy, but on the back end after they've had their child, or if they come to us already with children that are young. We are going to talk about child development. We'll talk about healthy attachment. We'll talk about potty training, just kind of practical things, building healthy relationships with your children, how to discipline in a positive way. So we're trying to not only give those basic needs, but also provide to help women and men feel empowered to be good parents. So that those are the kind of the general kind of basic services that we provide. And if you are someone who needs services or wants to refer us to someone who you think needs good health care, you can get a hold of us at thesource.org. That is the landing page for our statewide network, and just select Austin, and that will get you connected right to our clinic here in Austin.
All right. Thesource.org.
Yes.
That's pretty straightforward.
Yes, it's simple.
All right.
But
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that you are on the way with Christ.
Oh,
and thank you so much for spending time with us today.
No, thank you so much, Eric. It has been a pleasure.
Just because a person follows Jesus doesn't mean that person is perfect. Following Jesus is a lifetime of growing more like Him. Likewise, while there are followers who are more mature than others, who have spent more time growing close to Jesus than other followers, there are no followers of Jesus who are better than others. If you aren't on the way with Jesus, we invite you to check out the Follow Jesus page on the Baptist Standard website at baptiststandard.com/Follow Jesus to learn more about becoming a follower of Him. If you are on the way with Jesus, we hope that this podcast has encouraged you to grow more like Him. We hope you enjoyed Season 2 of On the Way. Even more, we hope you found in someone's story inspiration for how you can follow Jesus. To offer suggestions for future interviews or ways to improve the podcast, please email us at the address in the bio. Keep an eye out for Season 3 of On the Way, to be released in January 2021. Until then, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a blessed New Year. I'm Eric Black, editor of the Baptist Standard, and I'm glad you've been with us today.